Hi everyone, welcome to Canopy Lab and welcome to the third week of the course Sustainability for You. My name is Singleuse and I am the Education Manager at Canopy Lab. I hope that you have enjoyed the course so far, where we have gotten an introduction to sustainability and talked about what it means to be sustainable in the industry of fashion and businesses in general. Today, we will have a more personal perspective on what it means to live a sustainable life. We're so fortunate to have with us Gitte Johansen, who is a blogger and who tries or who lives a zero waste life. And in just a minute, we are going to hear from her. But today is structured a bit different than we normally do. Normally, we start out with a short talk. Today, we will structure it around a Q&A primarily. So if you have any questions to our speaker, Gitte today, I will encourage you to go ahead right away and ask your questions. I can see that we already have a greeting from Gordana, who says, "Hi everyone, greetings from Belgrade." And just as Gordana does, please go ahead and use our Q&A feature to ask a question or to introduce yourself to Gitte or to the rest of your peers. You can find the Q&A function in the top right corner of the screen, and by clicking on the Q&A sign, you simply activate the function, and you can write your question. You can also upvote other people's questions, so if there's a question you particularly like, go ahead and give it a vote, and after the questions that I have prepared, we will go to your questions. With that said, welcome to Canopy Lab, Gitte.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So I am sure that all of our listeners and learners are very excited to hear about you and your life. It is very interesting, and I imagine that other people feel like me and think that this is a very huge challenge to live a life as you do. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself, and tell us about what it means to live a zero waste life.
Well, I will. My name is Gitte. I live in Denmark. More specifically, I live in Aalborg, where I study English literature. I'm also a blogger, and I've been a blogger for about 5 years. I started out as this mainstream fashion, lifestyle, makeup blogger, and I actually worked at Copenhagen Fashion Week as a street stylist and as a street stylist photographer. But a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, around this area of time, I stumbled upon a blog called Treasures for Tosses by Lauren Singer. Maybe some of you know her. She's an amazing girl. But she was so amazing, and she had all her trash for 3 years, I think, in this jar. And this picture, this symbol of waste just really moved something within me, because I never thought about waste and environmental trouble and climate in any way. I never really cared so much. But then I learned through her blog that every piece of plastic that has ever been produced, and we start producing plastic in 1930, around this time, and all this plastic still exists somewhere on the planet, and that fact just blew my mind away. But it's really logical, actually, as plastic is an oil-based product and an oil-based material, and that's not something that just goes away. It's the same as we put in gas. So it just made a lot of sense, but I never thought about that way. The same thing with waste and what we put in our landfills and in our garbage. I never thought about claiming responsibility for what you throw out, and this mentality of claiming your responsibility and taking responsibility for what you throw out just really moved something within me. So I asked my boyfriend, at that time boyfriend, now fiance, would you want to do this zero waste with me? Would you want to try to do this for a month maybe? And he said, well, that sounds really exciting, but also super difficult. And I always liked stuff that are difficult. I always really thought about this as a great challenge. So So I was completely on board with it, and he was completely on board with it, and we did it for a month. And it took a lot of time to get into, and we needed all these facts and really research the subject. But we did this for a month, and then it was just too fulfilling to ever stop doing it. And now we're over a year in, a year and a half, maybe a bit more, and it's going great. I blog now mostly about zero waste, also a bit about dreadlocks and lifestyle and what I do and whatnot, but primarily about zero waste and my journey and what problems I have with it, and all these things, how I do this and how I do food and how I do fashion and how I maintain a lifestyle without producing any waste. And that is what my blog has been about for about 2 years now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Quick intro.
And that was great. And we will take it from there. So a couple of years ago, I think there was this program that aired on Danish television where we followed a group of people living together who tried to live a zero waste life for a while, and you followed their problems, just as you say, all the struggles and the challenges, the things that they hadn't thought about. So everything from how they bought food, produced their meals, how they went to the restroom, and so on. Could you try to do the same here? Try to describe a day in your life. What is a normal day in the life of Gitte Mary? How does that look like? And then we can probably all of us see the differences to our own lives.
Well, I'll try to boil it down because otherwise this course will go on for ages. But what I usually do, I'll start by, okay. Firstly, one of the things that I really, really enjoy about zero waste, I really enjoyed when I started zero waste, was this reflection of everything that I consume and everything I buy. I think it's really healthy process to just look back, take a step back, and just realize what kind of products are you purchasing and why are you purchasing these things. And that's the first step, at least for me in zero waste, was to realize what unnecessary things I was so dependent upon, what kind of disposable items that I was dependent upon. And the first thing I did was I switched out all of these disposable things, like plastic cups and glasses, like plastic bags, and switched it for something that is reusable and compostable in the last end. So that is wood and canvas and glass and stuff that can last you a really, really long time. And when it is broken or when it is old, you can recycle it in a proper way that is not so energy consuming. So that's just before I just get started. But my day will typically consist of going to the farmer's market or going to the greengrocers that's in the center of the city, and I live outside the city. So either I take my bike or I take a bus, and I do that with maybe 6 or 5 canvas bags, large canvas bags, and then some smaller ones for bulk items. And then I bring a couple of glass jars as well, like marmalade jars, something like this and something like this, so that I will be prepared for everything that I need to go and shop for. And I do grocery shopping maybe 2-3 times a week. And when zero wasting, it's really difficult to do in grocery shops. So I do not normally go to grocery shops. I stick to cheese shops and butchers and greengrocers and the farmer's market, where everything is local and organic, which I really love. And also it's package free, so you get all this bulk. You get peas and carrots and flour and sugar and pasta, all of these things in bulk. So I take my bike or my bus, and then I go to the center of the city and I shop. I come home, and what I usually do then is I lay everything on a table, and then I take pictures of it for my social media. I use a lot of time every day when I'm not studying at university, taking pictures, editing pictures, making posts, and promoting zero waste lifestyle. Because for me, at least, it's a huge part of it. It's spreading the message, which is a really positive message. So I use a lot of time on this, and I'm taking pictures of everything. And I usually, because of zero waste, my fiance and I, make everything from scratch. So pasta and taco, tortilla, pancakes, salsa, squash popsicles. I need to think of more stuff that we did. Also chocolate spread Nutella-ish. We also make that ourselves from wild hazelnuts. So zero waste is incorporating creativity into your everyday life, and that's what I do. We try to find new solutions to problems that we may have. A typical problem may be you're making a spaghetti bolognese and you want to put some basil on it. And in everyday life, maybe you'll probably go to the grocery store and buy some fresh basil and put it in your dish. However, when zero wasting, it's not that easy, and I wouldn't call it easy actually, because I think it's a huge complicated process because of the packaging and this industrial farming. Instead, we grow everything in our window. So we have basil and we have chives and we have lemon and we have avocado and we have tomatoes and cucumber, everything we have in this small one-room flat. And if I want basil on my spaghetti bolognese, I plant it maybe 2-3 weeks in advance, and then I have basil. So people tell me, this sounds difficult, this sounds so boring. But actually, I think it's super freeing. It's not restrictive at all, for me at least. I think it's so freeing to distance yourself from all of these things that we have been manipulated into believing that we need. And instead of just jumping on that wagon and say, okay, I need this, I'm going to the grocery store. Instead, I am trying to, and I know lots of other people are trying to rethink this process and try to be responsible for some of this consumption. So that is a huge deal of my everyday life. Huge part of it is to stay aware of this and try to remain creative in this process. I cannot think of anything. I will maybe think of something else at some point in relation to my everyday life.
Good. Do you want to continue, or do you want me to jump in? Because I have a question here.
Yeah, have a question.
So one of the things that I think of when you talk about this is, first of all, it seems to be very time consuming. And also, it seems to be a very expensive lifestyle. When you, so you said you are a student, and I know that that is not something where you earn a lot of money. How does that work? Is it possible to do, and how much do you have to think about that? And do you think that does it take up time from something else that you wanted to do? How do you make that work with time and money?
Okay, firstly, the time-consuming part is that I made zero waste into my hobby. I don't go to the gym. I don't play football or go out and dance, stuff like this. I really, really love having zero waste as a hobby. So I don't feel like it's taking any space from other things I would be doing. I know a lot of my friends, they're watching tons of series and movies, and I know I have a friend, she just watched in a few weeks all seasons of Hannibal, for instance, and I asked her, where do you find this time? And then I realized, oh, it's because I've been sitting up all night creating recipes for zero waste. But it's my hobby, and I really like that. But I try to communicate all of these things that I spend so much time on, and I try to communicate them in a manner that it is not as time consuming for the ones who is reading and receiving this information, because it shouldn't be something that you should spend your entire life on. It should be something that can be incorporated into your life, and that's what I'm trying to do with the blog and with the YouTube and Instagram and everything. Then this economical thing, is it too expensive? Because lots of people ask me this as well, because I am a student and I make just about no cash. But I don't think it's that expensive after all, because I thought that it would be when I got into it. But because we make so much of this stuff ourselves, we save tons of money. We go to the farmers market and the greengrocers, and they make deals for us that are just incredible. We get maybe 4-5 kilos of carrots for what is equivalent of £2, something like this. Just incredible masses of greens and vegetables. So what we save on vegetables, we might spend at the butcher's shop. Both my fiance and I, we eat some meat, but not a lot. We have tons of meat-free days, because that's also a big part of sustainability, is trying to minimize the meat and dairy industry. So we eat very little meat, but when we do, we go to the butchers, we get it organic, we get it local. So we do not support all of these big corporations. And that can be expensive, that can be hella expensive. But again, we save so much on veggies, and I think lots of people have this prejudice about greengrocers and about farmers market, that it's super expensive and it's very exclusive, but actually it's such an open community, and everything is super cheap. So it's not. I actually think I used more money on food when I did in zero waste, because everything should be pre-packaged, and you need to pay for this packaging. It needs to be pre-made and pre-produced, and we need to pay for that as well. And I've just skipped those steps, and I just make it at home, so it's not that expensive after all.
Thanks. I just want to encourage all of you listening and watching here to continue to ask questions. I can see that we already have quite some questions that we will go through in a bit, but just continue to ask questions throughout this lecture, and we will go through them a bit later. So when you made this transition a year and a half ago, and you had 1 month where you tried it, and then you decided to continue, what did you find was the most difficult thing? What was the most difficult change? And were there some things that was just easy, and if anything, were there something you thought was extremely challenging to change?
Well, and I think lots of people will recognize this behavior, but what is the hardest thing to change is your impulse behavior and your habits, because and I know this from loads of people who said, oh, because of you I'm trying to skip the plastic bag and stuff like that, but they still do it, and it took some time to get used to this new lifestyle and get used to this new mindset, and it was super difficult to, for instance, if you're sitting at home at 9 o'clock and you're just really craving pepperoni pizza, it can take some time to get this mindset that, oh, I don't need that. I don't need that. That's so important. Do you need something, or do you want something? And that mentality is extremely difficult to reset, because at least my generation, we have been brought up with this behavior. So it's really difficult to break at some point, if you follow me. So that was the most that was the hardest part, was to break these habits and these impulse behavior. What was the easiest part, or what was the easiest part of transitioning to zero waste, was actually the transitioning part of the switching one product out for another product. For instance, I started looking into making my own makeup, and I made mascara and foundation and blush and eyeshadow and lipstick and all of these things, and I switched that out for pre-made ones, and I just made my own stuff. And that was super fun, because everything was new and you could just play with it a little bit and just take it one step at a time. That was really fun and super easy. Also, something like switching out all kitchen utensils from plastic to glass and wood and aluminum and stuff like that. That was also really easy. That's a really easy part, because you can see this and you can, see a physical thing and then replace it. But the things inside your mind is a little bit more difficult to transition.
Do you think that this is something that everyone can do? I imagine that they're in this transition and in this lifestyle is from other people. There is kind of like a stereotype around people living this kind of life. It's connected to people being more alternative or hippie. Do you think this is something everyone can do, and what does it take to do them? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Oh, yes, I definitely think this is something that everyone can do. I know that there's this stigma that you need to be this tree-hugging, earthy hippie. And at some at some point that actually quite relate to me, because I sometimes I feel a bit like a hippie, but that is not something that that is evident within all zero wasters. I know, for instance, Lauren Singer from Treasures for Tossers or Bea Johnson from my zero waste home. They're not hippie looking at all. They're just really normal looking, actually. So it is not something that relates to just one specific type of people, but that's something that everyone can do. And that's also what I try to do with my blog, is I try to make this information something that everyone can benefit from, or something that everybody can understand. Basically.
Thanks. So on this question, I want to go to one of the questions that we have here from Gordana Nesovic. So she's asking about how you can influence people to make this kind of change around habits that you already talked about, and kind of like changing people's mindset around this. So she's her question is, how much does education in school, how much can that influence changing bad habits that affect pollution? And while she's asking specifically about pollution, we can also just make it in general to sustainability and issues around that.
Well, I think that educational systems and educational courses in school is a really huge part of it, and you can learn so much, and it's such a great time to get into the minds of young people, is by influencing them while they are at middle school, for instance, because that person, though, I don't want to be this educational academic person who writes articles and scientific approaches on this thing, because I like to be relatable, and I like to be someone who everybody can understand, and I like to be maybe the symbol of someone that does not have an education in this field but still is able to find this information and use it in my own life. But I think it's so important, and I think that's something that happens all by itself, that you influence other people just by making a change on yourself. You don't have to be preachy. You don't have to point fingers at people and tell them what to do, because that will happen automatically. Like Bea Johnson from my Zero Waste Home states at a Google talk, I think, buying is voting. And it's the same with behavior. By behaving a certain way, you're voting for this certain behavior. A story that connects to this slightly is that at one of my first speeches, one asked me afterwards if I got into the grocery store and I ripped out the tomatoes in packaging and put them in my own bag and then left the packaging there. And lots of people asked me this question, but I thought it was mind-blowingly insane to ask something like that, because it has nothing to do with zero waste, but apparently I didn't make my point clear enough. And that would not be relatable to buying is voting, because if you do this, because I know some people actually do this, but I can understand that, because when buying these tomatoes, the firm, the company who produces them, they don't care whether or not you leave packaging in the supermarket. Their product has been sold and they get the profit. So in the long end, you're still voting that this is a good product. You're voting that, yes, this is something you should keep on doing, because they can't see what you're doing on this micro level. They can only see the big picture. So instead, you should refuse to buy pre-packaged tomatoes, and you should buy something that is unpackaged, because that is the only way that companies in the industry and the supermarket will know what you actually like. And that sort of behavior is the same thing. When you, for instance, are at a party, I usually bring my own glass, because wine and beer is sometimes served in plastic glasses. And I don't care for that. And I do not want to go with a pouty face all night because of this plastic. Instead, I have my glass, and people come up to me and they ask, what you doing? What is this? And I tell them that's because I don't like the plastic. And that is so much more powerful than pouting in a corner at a party. Or preaching at a party or to your friends and family. But being this change, Gandhi style, you want to see in the world is so much more powerful. So that would be my answer if that wasn't massively long.
It was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for that. So one of the things I've been thinking a lot about before we had this talk today is the reactions from family and friends. So around the time, at the same time where you made this transition, I made the transition to becoming a vegetarian. Something where I had a bit of a pushback from some people, but also felt a lot of support from others. So from a personal experience, I know that there can be, you know, some people not understanding it that much, and this is just a small thing compared to the transition that you have made. So I'm wondering, what were the reactions from friends, family, students at fellow students at university? Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. Well, firstly, I think that vegetarianism and veganism, when you switch into this, that's a huge transition as well, especially if you feel this pushback from your surroundings, because that I can totally relate to. Because when I have my meat-free days, people are always coming up to me, it's like, oh, you're one of us vegan people, oh, and you get this reaction, this vibe of negativity, and that's just so sad, because you're doing something that is actually benefiting the earth so much. So it makes me so sad that you can get this pushback at sometimes, but you can, sure, and also with zero waste. My family is so sweet when it comes to zero waste, because I always get my cutlery and my glass and my plate in reusable materials, which is awesome. And they're so sweet, and they don't wrap presents, for instance, in gift wrapping paper, but I get it in a canvas bag instead. So they're super sweet, and they're helping me transition, and they have this huge understanding for what I do and why this is so important to me. They like to make jokes and make fun of me sometimes, but hey, for instance, my brother-in-law, he always he sends me text messages with something that is so far from zero waste, and then he just writes zero waste. So he makes these jokes all the time, but at some point, I think that's also a piece of evidence that you are planting seeds somewhere, that people are getting to know this concept and what it means. So I see this as a good thing. My friends also super supportive. I have not experienced pushbacks from any of my relatives or my friends. However, I did experience, and I still do experience, tons of negativity from people I have no idea, people that I don't even know. Which is sad. I don't like that, because, but maybe this is some sort of Danish thing, but I get the sense and I feel that people may interpret my behavior as some sort of judgment upon theirs, and that's not where I'm going with this. Last September, I was nominated for a prize here in Aalborg, and that was some sort of sustainability award that I was nominated to get, and that was such a big honor. For my work, I really loved it, and because of this, one of the larger Danish newspapers, they posted a picture of me on Facebook with my canvas bag and my jar and while I was bulk shopping, and they just posted that, oh, this girl, she's doing this and she's zero waste, and this is what zero waste is, and this is what she's doing, and she's nominated to get this award. And there was just hundreds and hundreds of comments of people calling me names and calling me a hypocrite and just being really nasty. And I didn't quite get why they wanted to be so nasty, but I think it's because that when you step out of line like this, and when you do something that is so different from everyone else in your area, people, they notice it, and they start immediately to look at themselves and interpret your behavior as something that is judging their behavior. That was at least how I felt, or what I seemed to uncover from these comments, was that some people are so afraid that they may be doing something wrong, that instead of looking at themselves and saying, hey, maybe I can do this too, or maybe that's a really good idea, kudos to her, instead they go like, oh, she's a bitch, we hate her. But that was from strangers. It hit me really hard though, but not in a way that would make me stop zero wasting. Far from, actually. I just kept going even harder and made even more posts and more videos, and just became even more active and started doing even more speeches to get this message out.
Thank you so much for that answer, and so great to hear that you continued even stronger what you do is simply great and inspiring. So thank you. The next thing I want to hear is, do you sometimes compromise, or are there situations where you feel you can't avoid to compromise? Like, for instance, when you're sick, when you travel, and how far would you go not to compromise on living a zero waste life?
Well, I believe that you should never compromise your health, for instance, for zero waste, because that is not where your focus is supposed to be. The focus, at least for me, on zero waste and living this plastic-free life is to eliminate everyday trash and everyday waste, and try to, for instance, like cups and glasses and plates and packaging and unnecessary packaging. But stuff like medicine, for instance, if you're really in need of medicine, you should not compromise that and say, oh, maybe I'll just try with this herbal tea, for instance. Because if you're sick, if you're physically ill, then you should not compromise that for zero waste. I think that would be stupid, to say the least. When that is said, you mentioned travel, and I traveled to Thailand with my family-in-law in September. And personally, I am not a big fan of plane travel, because it is so polluting air, and I prefer bus, or I prefer train, for instance. I really like trains, and my boyfriend and I, our fiance and I, we actually are planning on our honeymoon to be by train, to be more sustainable. But we went to Thailand, and it was extremely hard to stay zero waste, I'm not going to lie. And in Thailand, there was also situations where I had no choice but to use plastic things, which was truly sad. But because of the drinking water, for instance, and I was not informed that you could actually get these straws that would cleanse the water, which is awesome. I learned about that when I came home. I was so sad. But a few plastic bottles, otherwise I would just simply dehydrate. And it is stuff like that. Stuff like this, I think you should not compromise. I think that you should think about, when you're traveling, for instance, stuff like, what do you pack from home? And try to look into situations. I packed my own straw, for instance, my own glass straw. I packed it in my suitcase. I also packed a plate and some cutlery, and then I used that during the trip instead. Luckily, and I was actually quite surprised, there was very little disposable ware like that in Thailand, because most street food places, they actually had reusable plates and such, which was awesome. So I didn't get to use it very much. But I think the most important thing is that when you do zero waste at home, you know what you're going to expect. Everything is something that you can calculate and see into the future and see, okay, this afternoon I'm going to do this. I'm probably going to bring my glass. But when you're on vacation, there can happen things that is unexpected, and that is okay. And I think in that context, you should probably let go a little bit, because that is something that you yourself, little person, cannot do anything about, and then focus somewhere else and use your energy wisely.
Thank you so much. I think that we will go to questions from the viewers now.
Yeah.
That we have all of these questions answered. So the first one I'm going to pull up here is from Gordana Nesovic. From someone with a name that is not. So the question is, and it starts with the comment, I think that the problem why people waste so much is that they don't think so much or not at all about the products they buy or use. So my question is, how would you make people more aware of the possibilities in zero waste?
Well, firstly, that is completely true. I think that lots of the waste that is produced is because of people and their habit of doing something that is easy and accessible to you, and because it's easy for you, it's probably good as well. And that sort of behavior really just, it bugs me so much, because that is poisonous behavior for people, because if everyone does that, it creates a huge problem, and that's the huge problem we have with the garbage patches, for instance. And that is something like disposable single-use plastic. That is exactly what that problem, the source of that problem. And I think I just touched on that before, but instead of preaching to people, instead of going up to them and pointing fingers and say, you're doing something wrong, instead you should show by your own example how you can do it differently, and apply the alternatives to your own life, and let people see that if the purpose of this is so pure and so innocent and good, that it will stand alone and be powerful by its own, and you do not have to preach, and you do not have to point fingers or be judgmental towards others, but just alone by applying alternatives to your own life, you will make such a powerful statement.
Thanks. And let me just say that the question was asked by Jesper, so now we have that sorted out. So the next question is from Gordana Neswith, and what she wants to know is, can we expect that one day officials or authorities will forbid plastic, like they have already forbidden smoking? So a comparison between smoking and plastic. Do you think that is something we will see in the future?
I know that several stores, and I think there's something going on in India as well, where they banned the use of single-use plastic bags, which is just awesome. I do not think it will come on the same footing as smoking. I do not see that happening, because whereas smoking is super harmful to your body, plastic is not the same kind of harmful. It's on a micro level these things are happening. So I think if it does happen, and if there is a total ban, it will be far out in the future. But I think, and that's what we need to focus on, that stores, for instance, are banning the use of single-use plastic bags, which is just awesome. Something like this is just a huge step along the way. And imagine if every store there was only canvas bags available, if you cannot buy them simply. I do not think it will be forbidden by law, but I think that more and more stores are being conscious about these choices that they are offering their not clients, but customers. Sorry.
I pull up a comment here, and that is from Gordana, who just asked the question, and she says, people who have a lifestyle like Mary, you, are heroes of the new age. So definitely you have supporters here on our course.
Oh, thank you so much. That means just everything. It's lovely. Love the vibes.
Great to hear that. From there on, let's go to a question. So we have talked a little bit about this, but what is your recommendation for others? What can we do to contribute cleaner and more sustainable to a cleaner and more sustainable world?
Well, if you want to apply these things onto yourself, I would recommend starting at the bottom and just starting out with something simple, like always carrying a canvas bag, and ban for your own life the use of single-use plastic bags. Something like that is so easy to do, and that is just a great stepping stone and a gateway onto to a much bigger picture and a much better behavior. I got comments loads of times about what do you do if you live with roommates, or what do you do when you live at home with your parents, for instance, because I know that is the case for a lot of people. And I made a video about that actually on my YouTube. But something that I have found to prove very effective is, instead of saying you should do this, you should do this, you should act more like this, what you're doing is wrong, and you're pointing fingers, instead you should say, well, let me do it, and then you're pointing onto yourself and by example showing them what you can do. An example is my father, for instance, who is very engaged in this whole thing, and he admires it deeply, but has a lot of trouble transitioning himself, and I don't think he wants to, but he's inspired by it for sure. And instead of just being mad at my father all the time and saying, well, you're still buying plastic bags, you're still using this, I say, well, should I do the grocery shopping? And then I come home with all these package-free veggies, and he says, oh, that's something you can do. Because I've researched this so much, and I think that people that are interested in this subject, they research and research, so they go deeper and deeper into the subject. So when they have to explain something to others who didn't research at all, it is not so obvious what their questions actually is. So, for instance, I was just going my way, just buying package free, and then I come home, and the thing that he focuses on is, you can use a canvas bag. Yeah, Dad, I told him, that is so obvious, but that is where his focus is. So small steps, and just instead of pointing fingers, you should apply this to yourself and show them what you can do instead of telling them what they should do, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And the next question, and I want to combine some things here. You're living in Aalborg in Denmark. And I just want to have your perspective on this in a broader context. So the question we have here is, in some countries, especially third world countries, people haven't money enough for ordinary stuff, and dangerous materials are cheaper than healthy materials and organic food. So if you look at it both in a Danish context, but also in the rest of the world, countries where these things are not as easy accessible or available, and where the money situation might be a bit different. Do you have thoughts around that at all? I know it's a big question. I'm not asking you to solve all of the problems, but do you have thoughts around that?
I think that's a huge question, and I think it would be ineffective to apply what we think is sustainable onto a country that does not have that privilege to take these actions, because living in the Western world, we're so privileged that we're able to choose from plastic and choose something else than plastic, which is just awesome. But some places, they do not have that opportunity, and I don't think we should bash them for not having that opportunity. Instead, it is something that some individuals in the Western world, and just this whole mindset, will maybe be able to change something, and that will perhaps result in an industry packaging stuff in cardboard, for instance, instead, which would be awesome. But I do not think we can apply the same ideas of sustainability right away, because we're so different. If that makes any sense. I'm not quite sure how to answer that properly without being just all up in here in space.
Thank you so much for the answer. I know that it was a broad question.
A good one, though.
Good. And let me just again encourage you to continue to ask questions. You have asked a lot of great questions today, so just continue. We'd rather have your questions than mine. So the next one I pull up here is really interesting and very specific. I'm glad about this, that this question is asked. So could you please elaborate on, for example, how homegrown basil can contribute to a zero waste life, and maybe also sustainability in general?
I can definitely elaborate on that, because the difference between homegrown basil and the basil that you buy in the supermarket or in a bunch, it comes in plastic. It is usually always coming in plastic. And the problem, or I wouldn't say problem, because farming is always great and veggies are great, but there is a huge plastic consumption when it comes to farming. And there is undoubtedly a lot of plastic waste when it comes to industrial farming, and I skip that by purchasing a seed in a cardboard bag, or I don't purchase a seed, I purchase hundreds of seeds, and then I plant them myself in dirt that I have, I wouldn't say grown or created, but using compost to give life to the seeds, so to speak. And it is more sustainable because, firstly, no plastic. Secondly, no toxins. in these veggies, which is also great. So it becomes, lastly, when there's no more basil on my basil plant, when it's just stems left, I composted it again, and I can use this dirt over and over and over and over. So that is more sustainable than purchasing something and throwing it away, because it becomes a part of this circle. Almost about to quote the Lion King here, but it's the circle of life, basically.
I want to mention, we have a comment here that I think is really great. So the comment is from Godana, who says, "My mother has a basket made of reed, with which she goes to the grocery store. She's been going to the grocery store for years. This is one of my childhood memories, but also a present one." I think that is really great. So thank you for sharing, Godana.
That's awesome.
So the next question is around businesses and the influence or responsibility of governments and authorities. So so here it is. Businesses have indeed a big influence on our lifestyles. For example, there's something called manufactured demand, like bottled water. Do you think that governments should regulate the market in order to change society to be more sustainable?
I definitely, I think so. It is not something that, at least in Denmark, is realistic within a time frame that is smaller than 10 years. I do not think that is something that's going to happen instantly, but I think with climate and environmental trouble and all this problematic and how well it is spoken of, I think that will be something will happen very soon regarding this problem, because manufactured demand and plastic bottles and bottled water is a huge problem, and I know especially in the United States it's a huge problem. In Denmark, not so much, because we have such clean water, so it's not something that I am exposed to every day, because we can drink water right out of the tap, and I know some places that you cannot. I am not quite sure how the situation is all over, but I know for a fact that on most plastic bottles in the United States there is some sort of recycle mark, and then you can recycle it. And the fact is that when you do this, they're just shipping all this shit to India, and then it's put in landfills there, so it's not really recycled, it's just transported, and now it's someone else's problem. So I think at some point the glass will overflow, so to speak, and I think that governments are being more and more conscious about this. So I hope, at least I hope, that we will see some regulations in bottled water, and we will see some more sustainable solutions.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I just want to encourage you, watching here, that if you have an example of what we just talked about in your country, like water, and if you have some information from where you are right now, feel free to share that with us, and we will run through that and kind of try to not only use the examples that we have here from you today, Gitte, Mary, but also from all the viewers. So feel free to share that with us if you have an example that we should hear. So, Gitte, Mary, I know from some of the things that some of your videos and your posts that, as you also said today, that you have a fiance and that you are planning a wedding. This is something that I'm very interested to hear more about. Planning such a huge event. I don't know how huge it will be, but like this, are you making that completely zero waste and sustainable? And how do you do that? Could you tell us more about that?
I will try to talk shortly about that, because when I talk about the wedding, and it's going to be around 50 to 60 people, and it's going to be in my parents-in-law's summer house, which is located at the beach. So it's going to be very close to nature, and my fiance is also very connected to nature as well. And there's woods in the background and beach in the front yard, so it's going to be very close to nature. We're going to utilize what materials is available, so it's like sand and weeds and stuff like that. We're going to use that. But when I talk about the wedding, I always say I'm going to make this wedding zero waste because I am stubborn as bloody hell. But my fiance is saying, oh, we are going to make it as zero waste as possible. So he's a lot more diplomatic that way, where I'm just really stubborn. But something that can be done if you want to create a party that is more zero waste or more sustainable. Now the wedding is going to be next year, so I can't really talk so much about that, but I can talk about my birthday. Me and my fiance, we had a birthday party where we invited both of our families because our birthdays very close together, and we had around 40 people for a zero waste birthday party with brunch and a big buffet where we made everything, and we went to the farmers market, we went to the butchers and the cheese shop, and we got all of these things, and it took a lot of time. And I think that is the essential part when you want to do something that is more sustainable, is that you have to plan ahead. And like I said before, you have to think about what you may be able to expect and calculate what situations you may be able to find yourself in. And that's really important. Something, for instance, that I want to do is decoration. It's going to be natural. It's going to be compostable. It's going to be something that is to be found within the nature around us. And then I'm not going to wish for, or we're not going to wish for presents, but experiences instead. It's something that is not able to be packaged. And if it's something that is going to be packaged, it's going to be packaged in canvas bags. I do not want disposable gift wrapping at my party or at my wedding. Dear God, no. Something like this we're going to do. We're also going to do, we're going to make a lot of the food ourselves, maybe only order the main course and then include the catering company in this thing and ask them what are you able to do in order to fulfill this idea, and talk to them and ask them, can you do this? And if they cannot, well, then you have to be creative and find another way to do it. But be very open and just ask questions all the time. What do you think is going to happen? Can you do this? Can you do this? We also go to be married, and we get married in thrifted outfits or in secondhand outfits, in vintage dresses and in a vintage tux, and in colors or in styles that are going to be able to look good in other situations than just your wedding. So something that you can wear on other formal occasions. So that way, reuse instead of dispose all the time, even at weddings.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So we have a comment from Jesper saying, well, our government in Denmark is not doing so much for sustainability right now, and then a smiley. So
yeah, they are not doing anything for sustainability.
Comment on that. That I think we can all agree on, and hope to see something change. And hopefully, with what you do, that is one of the things that can make people aware. So, could you talk to us about some of the initiatives that we see? Do you know, from what you know, doing this and doing a lot of research about this and working with it, do you see some new initiatives coming up in Denmark and other places that inspire you? And also, do you see this as part of a trend that we will see continue? Could you talk to us about that?
Sure. Well, I would not categorize zero waste and generally the awareness of sustainability as a trend, but more like a wave or an aspect of society that is hopefully here to stay. But within the last few years, I have actually seen more and more initiatives regarding bulk shopping, package-free supermarkets. I've seen there are two on the way in Denmark, and generally food waste is a huge thing right now, which is awesome. I've also been contacted by French companies that specify in bulk and reusable bottles and stuff like that. So I think it's going to, it will only be a bigger and bigger thing of our daily life supermarket experience, that you can come in with your containers and refill them. That is something that I know in supermarkets today, because once I went into a supermarket with my jar, and I asked them, can you put something in this jar? It was at a butcher's department in the store, and I asked, can I get the flank steak in this jar? And he said, no problem whatsoever. There was a package-free piece, probably came from a larger packet, but it's better than the individually wrapped pieces. And he said, no problem, and just threw it in my jar, put it on away, and just put a sticker on top, and that was it. Then I came in the week after that, and then he said, I can't do that. That's against our regulations. That is something with health and hygiene, and I can't do that. And I tried to say, well, why is that unhygienic? Can you tell me why this is unhygienic? This is a sterilized piece of glass. I don't know why you don't want this. And I think there is, of course, some sort of regulation, but it's completely illogical. But I think some of it was also the notion that he didn't want to be troubled with my ways. So I think there are a lot of pushback from regulations and laws, and definitely the government, as there was the one commented before that the Danish government is doing squat. That's completely true. That is super, super sad. But I think we're seeing more and more initiatives and more feedback and support for these initiatives. And it's like rings in water, actually, when somebody's speaking out loud and people are listening, or on Facebook, for instance, sharing and liking, the rings get bigger and bigger. And at some point, I think we will be able to influence politics on a larger scale.
Are you ever tempted to go back to, and could you see that happen for yourself in the future? Or are you sure that this is how you will live your life?
I am sure that this is how I want to live my life, because I think it's a beautiful thing to be aware of the footprint that you leave on this earth. I think it is also something I want to leave as a legacy within my children. That is something I think the new generation should be even more aware of than we are. And it is something that I want to do forever. And this is a journey, and I think that's the most important part, that zero waste is not something that happens overnight, because it's everything. It's every single aspect of your life. And it is something that you can keep nurturing and keep growing. And zero waste is also super, super individual. I know that some people are bashing someone because their behavior and their purchasing of coconut oil is not CO2 friendly, and plastic here and veganism here, and just people yelling at each other all over the place. And I think the zero waste, or the consciousness of sustainability, is such an individual thing that there should be room for everyone's progress. And as long as you're promoting the right things, I don't see how that should be an issue. But that is something I want to keep working on and keep spreading.
Thank you so much. We are almost out of time. Is there anything?
Oh, I can see, yeah. That went quickly.
On a final note that you would like to add? Something we haven't touched upon that you would like to say?
Something that I told you just before we got started, that it would be such a shame if I didn't talk about it, and then I didn't talk about it, so now I have to talk about it. Zero waste, and this sounds so stupid because now it comes completely out of nowhere, but zero waste consists of 5 R's, and it's such a good thing. If you want to get started on zero waste, this is how you can trigger your mind to think differently. The 5 R's consist of refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. Refuse, for instance, say no to freebies and say no to stuff that is handed to you. In plastic packaging, say no to your impulses and habits, and just say no to stuff you know is not sustainable. Reduce is, for instance, the reduction of meat in your everyday life. That maybe have meat-free Monday as a starter thing. Reduce stuff you know is not good for you or for nature. Reuse is something like bringing your own glass to school with water. Very, very little things. It's like transitioning from a plastic bag to a canvas bag. Reuse. Recycle, and that's also a thing where I think lots of people go wrong, is that they think zero waste is about recycling more, but it's actually about recycling less. It's about creating less waste, but the waste that you may create can be glass or paper or cardboard, which is easily recycled. And then lastly, rot, which is compost, which is taking part and participating in a bigger circle and giving something back. I think that's a really, really important part, is that this whole purpose is to give something back. That's the last thing I want to say.
Thank you so much. So I don't, based on what you have told us today, I don't want to ask you to give us an advice on how we can change our lives. Instead, what I want to do is ask you what has been the best for you because of this transition. What is the best thing for you?
I think it has actually been the process, as I said right in the beginning, it is the process of rethinking what you think you know. I think it's such a healthy process, and if you do it regarding zero waste or regarding fitness or regarding diet or whatever, you can do this with all kinds of things, but that you rethink your habits and just reflect upon your place on this planet, in the society, whatever. But reflect and turn your eyes inwards for a second. And I think that's such a healthy thing, and it will shine through you that this is healthy, this is a healthy mentality, and it will also feel really, really good on the inside. That has been my number one result and thing. It's my whole perspective upon me and the world and everything.
With that,
it sounds really abstract and hippie, but
thank you so much. And with that very inspiring comment, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us your lifestyle and your ideas and thoughts around that. It has been fascinating and inspiring, and I'm sure that the learners will agree. So thank you so much for being here, and good luck with the blogging and with the wedding. I hope you will.
Thank you.
So we can follow it. And to all of the listeners and learners, I hope that you enjoyed this just as much as I did. And I will see you on Thursday for Activity Hour at 8 o'clock CEST. And I will send out the link. So have a good day, and see you soon.